Hey guys, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. As always, we thank you so much for being here for another video. We're pretty excited to bring you guys this video today. We did two other videos just like this where we did the first and the second round of basically an overall slash sort of mock draft overall rankings. Weird kind of thing. You'll talk a bit more about that in a second, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
And then we're doing this one. It's just like that, but it's PPR, and so basically it's a combination between our rankings and our and a mock draft. But now it's for PPR. As we were just talking a little bit a few minutes ago, it's so important to get your league right and to understand your rules and to maximize your points by knowing who scores. So we're just going to talk who is getting bumped up, who gets bumped down from our regular rankings when you shift into a PPR league. As always, before we get started, check out our website so you can see our rankings all the time. They're constantly updated. If you'd like to support us, you can do that on Patreon. We would be so thankful. And of course, you can check out our Facebook too. We post all our videos there if you would like to get notifications.
We just started Twitter.
And we just started Twitter. There's not too much going on there, but we're going to start working on developing a system. All our videos and everything is going to be posted there as well. So what do you want to say before we get started?
Yeah.
You always have your little clarifications and things.
I love to throw this out there. First of all leagues are not created equal. There's a key difference. This is so important. Don't think, standard rankings, PPR rankings are the same. It doesn't really matter that much. It matters a lot. For years I had been in many different drafts. I had many different fantasy leagues. I've been in standard leagues, keeper leagues, redraft leagues, you name it. But the one thing that I hadn't been in was a PPR league. So I got invited to be in a full point PPR keeper league. And the first couple of years, I did all right. I was kind of middle of the pack, and I was kind of surprised because in all the other leagues I've been at, I had a lot of success. And the mistake that I made was realizing there was a vast difference between standard and PPR scoring. Once I understood the nuances of that and the differences and realized that it really does matter and there is a difference in it and how you approach it, I changed my approach, shot up the standings, and ultimately ended up winning, I think, a couple years. So know your scoring system, know your league rules. They do matter. Now, with that said, it's kind of weird. What is this? Is it a mock draft? Is it overall? Well, it's a combination of both. It's kind of our overall top 24. Yet it's also kind of a mock draft. So kind of what we're doing is a hypothetical draft, okay? And like in any draft that you're in.
So we'll get started with our number one guys. We happen to have the same number one guy, Le'Veon Bell. Now for me, Le'Veon Bell was ranked number 3 in standard leagues. That's where I have him right now. But he comes in number 1 in PPR, and here's why. We all know how crazy he is. He's such a good running back. Last year was his 3rd straight year with over 1,200 yards rushing, plus last year he had 85 receptions on 107 targets. Those 85 receptions are insane. That is first among running backs and 10th overall among all positions, so 10th when you even include tight ends and wide receivers and running backs and all those positions together. So for me, he bumps up because he catches the ball more than any other running back in the NFL. That's a lot of points. That's basically 85 extra points you're getting throughout a season, so that for me, he becomes number 1.
Yeah, so for me, when it comes to PPR, for me, hands down, number 1 is Le'Veon Bell. He's my number 1 pick in PPR leagues, and I think he should be number 1 pick in yours. His average catches per game, when you take that out and you project over 16 games, turns out to be 91 per season. Now, last year he said he had how many 80 was it that he had down there?
85.
85, but he sat a game out. Last game he sat down. They didn't need him to play, so he sat. If you look at now last year, his yards per carry down to 4.0. There's a few reasons why it was lower. He missed all the preseason. He was out of shape. First 2 games, his yards per carry 3.2. You take that out of there, and he had a really good season. 3 previous years, his yards per carry were 4.9, 4.7, or 4.9. He was very solid. 3 of the last 4 years, when healthy, he's at over 2,000 total yards together and average double-digit TDs. He's the most secure and safe PPR running back out there right now. What's interesting about that is the number 2 guy that we're going to talk about, at least for me, and he was going to be Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley, I think, had something like 62 catches last year. Well, if you take a look at it, Le'Veon Bell averages 30 more catches per season than Todd Gurley's best season ever in terms of reception. So this guy's your gold standard in terms of running backs and PPR league scoring. I love Le'Veon Bell. He's my guy there. Once again, his average catches per game, average over 16 games, turns out to be 91 catches per season. This guy's phenomenal.
That's great. That's awesome. So now we'll move on to our number 2 guys. So my number 2 guy is David Johnson. In standard leagues, he's number 2. He doesn't move up because of how much Le'Veon Bell increases and just how dominant he is in PPR leagues, but he is so good and he does have added value. Some people might say that he shouldn't be a number 2 in standard, and I say, okay, maybe you move him down to 3, number 4. He is definitely number 2 in PPR leagues. There's really no arguing it. He didn't play last year, of course, but in 2016 he had 80 receptions for 879 yards. A lot of the concern with him is that they don't trust Sam Bradford's health and that they don't trust their rookie quarterback, and what if the quarterback play isn't up to par for David Johnson? And that's really not a concern here. First of all, Sam Bradford loves to check down to running backs. A couple years ago he had set the highest completion percentage in a season, and so and that's kind of how he does that, checking down to running backs, throwing to his tight ends a lot. So I think that bodes really well for David Johnson. If Bradford gets hurt, so will the rookie running back will do that. I really like what you said the other day. Even if he struggles in the run game, even if somehow, which he won't, but even if somehow he only gets 800 yards rushing, that means they're going to throw the ball more. And you know who's going to get more catches? David Johnson. So I think he's in a great system. That's not a concern at all. Easily the number 2 guy for me.
All right, so my number 2 guy is Todd Gurley. Now, he had a bad sophomore season. I wouldn't worry about that at all. We said in previous videos, I chalk it up simply to Jeff Fisher's bad coaching and Jared Goff being a rookie quarterback at this point. Now, if you look in his career, now we can get so caught up in PPR leagues, you get fixated on receptions, and they're very important, but you can't overlook touchdowns. This guy's had 35 touchdowns in 44 games. That's very good. Last year, he had over 2,000 total yards and 19 touchdowns. At 6'1", 227 pounds, he's a big physical back who can handle a heavy workload, which I love that. Now, much like Bell, we didn't talk about Le'Veon Bell, but him and Bell have a similar situation. And what I mean by that is they're surrounded by a lot of talented players, so it's going to make it hard for opposing defenses to load the box and shut him down. If you take a look at his increase, Todd Gurley is now in this will be his 4th season, and each year in the league, he's increased in his involvement in the passing game. If you look at his first year, he had 21 catches. Next year, he had 43, and then last year, he had 64 catches. After that, he also increased his yardage totals. He went from 188 to 327, and last year he had 788 receiving yards.
All right, so now Todd Gurley's my number 3 guy, and here's why. I love everything that you said. I really like the fact that even though that offense got on fire last year, and he really improved from his second year, and even though his running game got better, his passing game still improved. Not only was he the number 1 fantasy scoring running back last year, he outscored the second guy by 68 points. He is so dominant. He definitely deserves the number 3 spot, at least for me. In fact, I don't think it's a stretch to put him at number 2. The only concern is that he only got 64 catches last year, which was his career high. And so that's the thing for me. He's a great running back, a dominant running back, but in a PPR league, he just doesn't quite get as many catches as these other guys. It's not to diss on him as a back. It's just that he's not quite there. He's a few catches away. However, if he got another 10-15 catches, I could easily see him moving back into the number 1 spot. I just don't think that he's going to be able to go out and get 85 receptions next season.
Okay. So for me, my number 3 guy is David Johnson. In 2015 and 2016, he had 12 touchdowns one year. The next year, he followed up with 20 touchdowns in 2 years. That gives him 32 TDs in 33 games. That is excellent. He has great hands. In fact, I think his hands in terms of running backs are only behind Le'Veon Bell and Christian McCaffrey in terms of how good of a running back he is coming out of the backfield, catching the ball. He had 80 catches in 2016. And last year, before he injured his wrist, he had 6 catches in the first game before injuring his wrist, which, by the way, it sounds like he's totally recovered from. He's going to be ready to go week 1. He's 100% there. Now, going back to what you said, I know we got a little bit of feedback in one of our videos. People are concerned they're going to struggle with the quarterback situation there. They might struggle to run the ball. But even if they struggle to run the ball, that only increases his PPR value because he's a true 3-down back. He rarely leaves the field except to take a breather. So this guy doesn't matter if they're in 3rd down or passing situations. He's on the field. He's going to get a lot of looks, a lot of targets. So for me, David Johnson is my number 3 guy.
Yeah, pretty solid. All right, so now we come to my number 4 guy is Alvin Kamara. Got to put him here. He had such a good rookie season with 81 receptions last year. He came in 2nd for receptions among running backs, 2nd only to Le'Veon Bell. The only reason he comes in 4 is not the talent. He finds the end zone well. He runs well. He receives really well. In fact, last year he had 100 targets, 826 yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. Man, he gets it done receiving just about as good as any other running back on this list. My only concern with him is Mark Ingram. Now, Mark Ingram is suspended for 4 games, and that's good news. And I think Alvin Kamara is the main man. I think that he's far better in the receiving game, and he's just as good at running. But Ingram is good enough that he's going to take some numbers away later in the season. And so for me, that's the only reason I keep him down at number 4. But he is still so good. And I think another thing to remember is this isn't necessarily PPR specific, but with 6.1 yards per carry last year, he gets it done so well running as well. I think a lot of people see him as only a receiving back, but he can definitely do both.
Yeah, so for me at number 4, I got Antonio Brown. And we talk about some of the greatest wide receivers of all time. You hear people talk about Randy Moss, this and that, other players out there. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about Antonio Brown. If you look at this guy's numbers, this guy is phenomenal. He's had a great career. In fact, if you look at the last 5 years, now remember it's a PPR league. In the last 5 years, he's averaging 116 catches per season. He's also averaged during that same stretch 1,570 yards with 10 touchdowns per season. This guy's the gold standard. He is the best, the number 1 wide receiver. He is the first PPR wide receiver, in my opinion, that should be off the book. So that's my number 4 guy, Antonio Brown.
That's a pretty solid pick. I don't have any disagreements. I am surprised that you would take a wideout this early. Even in a PPR league, it feels like you would never take a wideout in the first round ever.
Yeah, you know, I'm a big guy. I running back early in offense, kind of the philosophy I go by. It's been successful for me. I believe in it strongly. But the one thing I learned, it took me a couple years in that league, is that when it comes to PPR leagues, wide receivers take on greater value. And so for me, yeah, he definitely moves up my rankings.
All right, so my first wide receiver on this list comes in at number 5, DeAndre Hopkins. In standard leagues, I have him at number 5, so he doesn't move up or down. In fact, he stays the same. For me, those top 4 guys are so dominant at running back and are able to get so many catches and do so much both rushing and receiving. It's hard for anyone to crack that lineup, so Hopkins is going to stay the same, despite the fact that he does have added value in PPR leagues. Last year he got 96 receptions, which is 6th among wide receivers. He had such a dominant season, 13 touchdowns. And remind you that he did that basically missing his starting quarterback for half the year. So I'd like to see what he could do this year now that Deshaun Watson's going to be there the whole time. I imagine that's probably going to increase his catches. I imagine he's probably going to get 100 or so catches this year. So definitely a little bit of added value there. Again, if you want to know why I have Hopkins ahead of Antonio Brown, go watch our standard first round video. But that's why I have him at number 5.
Yeah, so my number 5 guy is a guy that actually went quite a bit up the standings for me, or up the rankings for me, because I switched from standard to PPR, and that's Alvin Kamara. I've got him as my number 5 guy. He was electric last year. He ended with a yards per carry of 6.1. That's phenomenal. He had 13 touchdowns. And here's the thing, he had 81 catches as a rookie. That is phenomenal. He had combined over 1,500 total yards. And he gets a huge boost right now with Mark Ingram being suspended for 4 games. So this guy's got a high ceiling. A lot of people were astounded last year that Christian McCaffrey went out and had 80 catches. Okay, well, let's not forget the fact that Alvin Kamara had 81. And he was simply better in every category than Christian McCaffrey. And people are pretty excited about Christian McCaffrey this year than they were last year. But in every way, Alvin Kamara was just a phenomenal, better running back. He had great yards per carry, great TDs, very involved in the passing game. This guy didn't look like a rookie in PPR leagues. For me, he's my number 5 guy.
That's pretty solid right there. I like that pick. All right. My number 6 comes in is Antonio Brown. Here's why. So previously he was at number 7 in standard leagues. He jumps up to number 6. Again, it's so competitive at this point. Everyone on this list in both standard and in PPR leagues are up here because they're able to get so many catches and so.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say, you nailed it. I think you made a very valid point. You know, at this point, it's really hard to screw up any of these picks. Any one of these guys, if you land one of these guys, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I feel bad you put a guy, it's like, oh, Antonio Brown for me is number 6 in this league, but he's such a good talent. Number 6 feels so far down, but also look at the guys he's competing with. Yeah. So there's a real reason for that. But he bumps up a spot because in Standard League before. I had Kareem Hunt ahead of him. They basically switch, and here's why. Antonio Brown over the last 5 seasons has averaged 116 receptions a year. That's insane. That's basically 116 extra points you're getting from this guy. I think that there are so many weapons there that I imagine he probably will get a little bit shy of 116. I don't imagine he'll be huge in the touchdown mark. I have a few reasons why Hopkins is a bit ahead of him, but man, he catches the ball more than any other receiver. So that's why I got to put him right there.
Okay. So for me, my number 6 guy is DeAndre Hopkins. I've got him after Brown. We kind of flip-flopped on that one. 2 of the last 4 seasons, this guy's had one season where he had 11 touchdowns, and he had another season with 13. So this guy finds the red zone. He finds the end zone. He's averaged 1,275 receiving yards over the last 4 years. His resume includes a 111 catch season back in 2015. Now, I'm not going to get into it. If you watch our wide receiver videos, or even if you get into our last video that you had mentioned, we're getting a lot of details, but what makes his stats phenomenal if you consider who's been quarterback for him through the years. We're looking at names like Case Keenum, Matt Schaub. You look at Ryan Fitzpatrick, Mallett. You look at Brandon Whedon, Brock Osweiler. These are some of the quarterbacks who've been throwing him the ball, yet he put up great numbers. And so now he's going to get not just an average quarterback, but it seems to me like he's going to have a very solid quarterback in Watkins. And that's going to be a huge bump for him, or Watson. And so I want to take a look at the games where he was a wide receiver and Watson was healthy, and they were paired up together. During those 7 games when Watson was quarterback, he averaged 6 catches, 92 yards, and a TD per game. You project that.
All right, now at number 7, I have Kareem Hunt. In Standard Leagues, I had him at number 6. He just gets bumped down for really one reason, and it's that he's only okay in the passing game. And he's not even bad. He had 53 receptions last year, which is okay. He only had 455 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. He's not terrible in the passing game. He's just not quite there with everybody else. Again, this list is so competitive. It's hard to compete with an average of 116 receptions from Antonio Brown, or 13 touchdowns last year by DeAndre Hopkins, or Le'Veon Bell's 85 catches. All these guys are doing so much in the passing game. It's just hard for Hunt to keep up. It's not that he's bad. It's just that we need to see him increase a few catches here and there to really keep up with these guys who are so kind of elite, to be honest. But I really like him here at number 7. Still a solid guy I'd love to have.
Yeah. So for me, number 7, I went with Ezekiel Elliott, and I was tempted to go some other guys at this point and bump him down and say, okay, this guy's not huge in the passing game. With that said, I've got to go with Ezekiel Elliott. One, he's not a slouch in the passing game. Another thing that's huge for this guy is he's averaged 1 touchdown per game in his career. Now, in PPR leagues, typically wide receivers are bumped up. They usually have great value. With that said, though, it doesn't matter what league that you're in, PPR, standard scoring, running backs are really the hardest to come by, and there's a major fall-off in production with running backs, and so this guy is huge value. I'm not worried about his production drop-off last year. A lot of people might say, well, he had a huge drop in his yards per carry. I honestly contribute that to his suspension. That was on, it was off. It was hard for him to prepare mentally and physically each week, not knowing whether or not he was going to play. That's out of the way now. He should be fine. Look at his last 6 games that he played. He averaged last 6 games before the suspension 118 rushing yards per game. He's got pretty good hands. People don't realize that in the passing game. He was on pace for 42 catches last year, which isn't phenomenal, but it's solid. And I think as a third-year running back, he can improve on that this year. So the one thing too that I like about him, he's like I said, he's averaged 1 touchdown per game in his career, but he's actually a little bit bigger and more physical than Bell and Gurley. Therefore, I think he's going to see a lot of red zone carries, a lot of goal line carries throughout his career. So I like Ezekiel Elliott as my number 7 guy.
That's a solid choice. Now at number 8, I have Odell Beckham. This is weird. I hate when we do this because we do our research separately, and then sometimes we end up having players at the same spot, and I'm like, well, what the heck? All right, that's great. I don't have too much to say about him. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on him, again, check out our Standard League video. He didn't play much last year, so it's hard to look at those stats, but in 2016, he had 101 receptions, which was 3rd among all receivers, so it seems only fitting that a big playmaker like this, who is 3rd in receptions the last time he played a full season, go as the 3rd wideout. It just makes sense to me with that added value for catches, and he sure gets catches.
Yeah, Odell Beckham could probably be taken sooner than I have him now, but I did put him at number 8. He's one of the most electric receivers in the NFL, not just now, but really in the history of the game, the way he's come on, what he's done and accomplished in his first 3 years in the league. The first 4 seasons, we look at his average per game stats. He projected over 16 games. He's averaged 107 catches per season, 1,506 yards, and 13 TDs. This guy is obviously very, very solid. So, and I think he's going to benefit this year from a little bit bit better offensive line play. They've improved their offensive line. They have some weapons around him. It should take away some of the attention he gets from defenses. So I like Odell Beckham at number 8. Obviously, you do too.
Yeah. I guess they say great minds think alike.
Or blind leading the blind.
Right. All right. Now at number 9, I have Julio Jones, and this is a weird pick for me because I'm just not a fan of Julio Jones as a fantasy receiver. Of course, you have his jersey. I have his jersey. I love him as a wideout. I love big-bodied wideouts. I've loved him since he's come into the NFL. But as a fantasy guy, he always makes me nervous because of the fact that he's struggled from time to time to find the end zone. However, don't let this fool you. Last year he had 88 receptions, which puts him 9th. That was actually low for him among other years. He's a huge catch guy. He's the number 1 receiver there. He should be here at number 9 in PPR leagues. That's what he does best. In fact, in standard leagues, I had him at 17 overall. So he bumps up quite a bit because basically receptions is what he does well. He's a big possession receiver. That's why I like him.
Yeah. So for me, number 9, I got Kareem Hunt. Going into 2018 season, he's going to really be their bell cow. He's going to be the guy they're going to lean upon. He's going to be the number 1 guy. He's highly involved in all aspects of that offense. He is a true 3-down back in every sense of that term. Last year, on the rushing tide, 11 TDs and 53 catches. Remember, and of course, this is a PPR league. Now, his 53 catches, if you take a look at names like David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, and Todd Gurley, who we said earlier are just great PPR running backs. They're great wide receivers out of the backfield. None of those guys had many catches as he had his rookie year. So his 53 beats all 3 of those guys, Johnson, Bell, and Gurley. He's another running back with no real glaring weaknesses in his game. I like Kareem Hunt at number 9.
Yeah, can't agree with that more. All right, now at number 10, I have Ezekiel Elliott. In standard leagues, I had him at 8, which I think some people thought was certainly low, but I got to go even further down with him now in PPR leagues to 10. Now, I know that he missed some games last year, but only 26 receptions. That's terrible. Even if you add those 4 games on, he barely passes 30 catches in a season. I mean, that's bad. He's really got to pick that up. Now, he had 25 touchdowns in his first 25 games. He's such a good runner, but he just doesn't catch the ball. And with how competitive we are, I mean, he still makes the top 10. In fact, to be honest, a guy who only gets 26 catches last season probably shouldn't even make the top 10 in my mind. But I imagine hopefully that number will go up a little bit this season. Of course, you'll play a few more games. But it's a real concern for me that this guy just doesn't catch the ball of the backfield. Not only for the fact that you're missing out on points, but also that on third downs, if you're Dallas, do you start thinking about bringing a guy in who can catch out of the backfield?
Rod Smith, maybe?
Yeah, because they need someone to do it. And so that's my concerns with him. But again, he's such a dominant runner that he's still got serious fantasy value. But I got to bump him down.
So for me, number 10, I got Julio Jones. Of course, guy's jersey on right now. He's broke over 1,400 receiving yards the last 4 years. Look at between the years of 2013 and 2015, he averaged 7.8 catches per game. You project that out, that's 125 catches over 16 games. In 2015, he had 136 catches and 1,871 yards. This guy's got a much lower value in standard leagues, but in PPR leagues, he's very, very solid.
All right, yeah. Number 11, I have Christian McCaffrey. He's a guy I had to bump up quite a bit. Now, I know he struggled last year. In fact, he burned some people. I know there were some people who were taking him in the first round or early second round, and he just did not perform quite to that level. However, the first half of the year, he was brutal, and the second half of the year, he really picked it up. He finished the season with 80 receptions, which was third among running backs. Very solid season. But even more than that, how his numbers increased the second half of the year. In fact, the last 8 games, he had 3 receiving touchdowns, which means that he was on pace for 6 receiving touchdowns on the whole year had he kept that pace up for 16 games. And once he finally kind of worked in that role and they learned how to use him and figured things out, I wouldn't be surprised if he had went out and got another 80 catches plus another 6 touchdowns receiving this year. And I wouldn't be surprised, again, he picked up the last 8 games. He really picked up his running game. He's a guy I wouldn't be surprised if he went out and got 900 yards rushing, another 900 yards receiving, and combined for 12, 13 touchdowns. He just gets the ball. He just gets it done in the air with 80 catches. He's so good. So I got to move him up a ton. In fact, in standard leagues for me, he comes in at number 23. So he basically cuts his ranking in half.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to become a great pure running back in the league, but if they get him involved in so many ways in the in the offense, so his total combined yards I think are always going to be very high. Number 11, I got Michael Thomas. So he's had 96 catches the first 2 years in the league. He's 25. He's still pretty young. He benefits from having Hall of Famer Drew Brees as his quarterback. I mean, that's huge. There's really no getting around his talent. I like the fact that he's 6'3". He's got good size. He had 92 catches as rookie. He followed that up with 104 last year. Now he's averaged 1,191 receiving yards the first 2 years. Now look at last year. He started off slow in the first 6 or 7 games, but he really picked it up down the stretch. In fact, if you look it up, what he did down the stretch, and you project that out for an entire season, he would add about 1,472 receiving yards. Also, all 5 of his touchdowns happened in the second half of the year. I think another thing he benefits from, too, is a stellar running game. So I think that he doesn't see as many double teams or as many safeties because of KAREEM, KAMARA, and Ingram in there. So I like Michael Thomas as my number 11 guy.
All right. Come in at number 12. In standard leagues, I had Travis Kelce at number 12, and he's going to stay there. Now, again, this pick comes in, you have to watch our other video to learn a lot, but this pick comes in not necessarily because of how he gets all these catches and all these yards and all these touchdowns, but mostly based on how he compares to other tight ends. And basically the synopsis of what I said is if you want to get a good tight end, you got to draft him early, and I don't think that this is too early for Travis Kelce, especially in a PPR league. He led all tight ends in receptions last year with 83, which is actually up there with a lot of other wide receivers and running backs that are early on this list. So he has a lot of value. Again, to reiterate how that value drops off, last year the number 1 fantasy scoring tight end scored 139 points. Just 3 tight ends later, the number 4 fantasy scoring tight end scored only 64% of those points, only scoring 90. So there's a huge drop off. If you want to get a guy, especially a guy who gets receptions, Travis Kelce and Travis Kelce early.
All right, so for me, my number 12 guy here is Christian McCaffrey. He drops down very, very far in my standard leagues. In fact, I looked at it right now. You got a mock draft. He hasn't even made it in the first 2 or 3 rounds. But I've got him coming up at number 12. Coming into the league, a lot of coaches and scouts said that he had the best hands of any running back that they'd seen in years. Some of them said the best hands that they've seen a running back ever. And so his 80 catches last year wasn't a fluke. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this year he breaks 100. That 80 catches, it's like getting an additional 13 touchdowns in a year. If you equate that out in standard scoring, that's huge. Now, he struggled the first 8 games. His yards per carry was 2.39, but his second 8 games, that rose to 4.68, so he seemed to figure some things out there. He's very stalled. He's a stud in the passing game. He had, like I said, 80 catches, 651 receiving yards. I think he's going to see an increase in his rushing yards, but I think you're right. I don't think he's going to get 1,000 rushing yards, but I could definitely see a guy that would maybe come in at 800 and 800, somewhere around there too. So he's my number 12 guy.
All right. All right, so now we come in here to the second round, first pick of the second round. I'm going to go Michael Thomas. You already said so much about him. Just to reiterate, I really like what you said. Last year he had 5 touchdowns. They all came towards the end of the season, the second half there. He came in third among all receivers with 104 receptions. And simply when you look at that, the fact that he on here for me, I believe, is my 5th wide receiver, even though he gets the 3rd most catches, might say he should even go a little bit higher. Again, only 1,100 yards, which is somewhat low compared to these other wideouts, and 5 touchdowns is the only reason I keep him a bit lower. But he'll probably get those touchdowns up this year, and 104 catches is hard to turn down in a PPR league, so he's my first guy in the second round.
So my first guy in the second round, they took Christian McCaffrey. They're going to follow that up with taking Mike Evans. I guess it really doesn't matter. They get back-to-back picks. They could have taken in whatever order. Mike Evans, the first 4 seasons, had over 1,000 receiving yards. Career in the NFL, only him and AJ Green actually can claim that. And there's some great wide receivers in the NFL right now. You look at Beckham, you look at Antonio Brown. None of them can say that, but Mike Evans can say that he's done that. Twice he's had 12 touchdowns per season, so that's good. He's young at 25. I love the fact that the Bucs signed him a long-term deal. It says a lot about the confidence that they have in him and their young wide receiver. Another thing that I like, now Winston was hurt last year, and I think that hurt some of his production. Winston has shown early in his career that he loves to look Mike Evans' way. In fact, go back to 2016, Mike Evans led all receivers with targets 173. Winston should be healthy. Evans should recover, have a huge year again this year. He is my first pick in the second round. They have Christian McCaffrey, and they have Mike Evans.
All right, solid choice. All right, so now at number 14, second pick in the second round, I'm going to go with Keenan Allen. Now, he had 102 catches last year, which puts him 4th among all wide receivers, just behind Michael Thomas. He had 159 targets. In the past, he's had some injury problems, but I think that last year he was completely healthy, and I think that this year he's going to be fine. I don't think that's a problem. Phillip Rivers is a good quarterback. He's the #1 guy there. In fact, I think it helps him that Hunter Henry's out. He's going to get more targets. I wouldn't be surprised if he topped 102 targets, if he got more this season, simply because of that. He was 21st in standard leagues, but because of that added PPR value, he moves up to 14 overall for me. Really like this guy. He gets a lot of catches. He's a classic possession receiver.
Okay, so my second pick in the second round, they picked Michael Thomas. They followed it up with Melvin Gordon. So Melvin Gordon's 58 catches last year is very good. This is a guy who finds the end zone. He's had double-digit touchdowns the last 2 years. Now his career yards per carry is not good, but you don't get doctor points in most leagues for that anyway, so who really cares? The last 2 years he's averaged 1,051 rushing yards, 12 TDs, 50 catches, and 447 receiving yards. So this guy's overall a real good quality back. Now, I think for me the key in this one, because if you look at his yards per carry, they're down a little bit, but he's solid and he has no competition for his job. I hate the dreaded running back by committee, honestly. I want to have a guy that I know he's going to get the carries. They're in the red zone. He's going to be the guy on the field, and in his case, Melvin Gordon's that guy. And so I wouldn't get all that preoccupied or too worried about the fact that his career yards per carry is below 4. I think that's going to be okay. Another thing that's going to be a huge boost, like you said, is that with both of those tight ends, with Gates retired and Hunter Henry out, some of those targets are going to go to guys like Keenan Allen. Some of those are going to go to Melvin Gordon. And so he is my second pick in the second round.
All right. Now we have my third pick in the second round, going to go SAQUON Barkley. Now in standard leagues, I had him at number 9, and for me, I'm going to drop him down to 15 in PPR leagues. And here's why. There's so much talent. It's so competitive in PPR leagues, and we just haven't seen him. He's in a perfect fit. They're playing for the New York Giants. That offense is great. There's so many other weapons, and that might be the problem. I think he's going to be great in the running game, and I think he's even a solid receiving running back. But I think that, first of all, we just don't know whether or not he's a solid receiving running back. But also, even if he is, he may be limited with guys like Odell Beckham, Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard. There's only so many catches your running back can get. I imagine he'll get 50 to 60, which I think is fine, but I think it's gonna. I think all those other weapons there in the passing game are going to keep him from having those elite reception marks, which for me bumps him down quite a bit. But again, I think he's going to have a great season.
Okay, so I'm picking up my third pick in the second round. They took Julio Jones in the first round, so right, follow him up with the running back, right? Well, here's the thing. All the Tier 1 running backs are off the board at this point, but there is still some Tier 1 wide receivers out there. So what do? Well, I follow up the Julio Jones pick with A.J. Green. I take the best talent available out there. A.J. Green's a future Hall of Famer. He's had over 1,000 receiving yards every year except 2016 when he was injured. And that year, he's actually on pace to have his best year with 105 catches, 1,542 yards. This is a guy that found the end zone 3 times in his career. He's had double-digit touchdowns. He's another receiver with great size at 6'4", and they have a new offensive coordinator. And I think that could bring some life or some new perspective to an offense that struggled at times. So I like A.J. Green. They got Julio Jones, A.J. Green. They are set for wide receivers at this point. Plus, the rest of the backs out there are Tier 2. They should be able in the third round get one of those running backs.
All right, solid pick there. All right, now at number 16, I have Devonta Freeman, and here's why. Last year, his numbers were down due to injury, yes. As I talked about in another video, we have some concerns with him, Tevin Coleman being there. He's a good running back. His 4 fumbles last season, there's some concerns. However, he has still been so good, averaging basically 13.5 touchdowns a season. And he does have a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of added value in PPR leagues. In 2015 and 2016, those seasons, he averaged 63.5 receptions a year. So he goes from number 18 in standard leagues to number 16 in PPR. That's about all I got to say about him. Pretty simple there.
Okay, so yeah, for me, my next pick, well, this team picked Kareem Hunt in the first round, so how did they follow up? Well, they followed up with Davante Adams. Davante Adams, according to my rankings, the last what I call Tier 1 wide receiver. Some other guys I'm going to talk about, like you look at Keenan Allen and Josh Gordon. Those guys actually have Tier 1 type talent, but they have question marks. So Davante Adams is the last Tier 1 wide receiver out there for me, so they take them. The release of Jordy Nelson is really huge for Adams. This is kind of a pass in the charge. He's going to become the number 1 wide receiver for one of the greatest quarterbacks that ever played the game. I know we've mentioned this stat before, but Aaron Rodgers leads all quarterbacks with a career quarterback rating of 103.8. In fact, he's the only quarterback in the history of the NFL that's got a career quarterback of rating of over 100. So he's phenomenal. You look at Jordy Nelson, the years that he was kind of the number 1 guy for Rodgers. Here's what Jordy Nelson did between the years of 2011 and 2016. During that time, he had some phenomenal numbers there that I apparently don't have here that I must have left on my other video. But I do want to say this, 2014, 2016, those years he had 97 catches, and he had followed that up with 98 catches. He had 4 seasons with over 1,000 yards. He had 3 years that he had double-digit touchdowns of 15, 13, and 14. So once again, going back to Jordy Nelson, what he did when he was number 1 guy for Aaron Rodgers, he was huge. Now he's out of the picture. Davante Adams moves into that role. I think he'd be very successful. And this is a guy the last 2 years had double-digit touchdowns. So I think this year he's going to continue that trend. He's going to get double-digit touchdowns, but he's going to easily break 1,000 yards this year. And I think 85 to 90 catches for him is very easily attainable.
All right, now number 17 overall, I go Dalvin Cook. In standard leagues, I had him at 13. I'm going to bump him down slightly to 17, and here's why. Last year, he was fairly solid throughout 4 games. He was on pace for 1,400 yards rushing, 8 rushing touchdowns, but he was only on pace for 44 receptions. Not horrible, not terrible, but not good. Just okay, I guess. I imagine he'll pick that up a bit. The offense had struggled while he was there, and I think that that's going to increase, so I didn't want to drop him a ton, but I do drop him a little because it's clear to me that he's not quite the receiving back that a lot of people expected when he came out of college. Now, I'm saying he might be a very talented receiving back, but if anything, if it's going to be anything like last year, I think we've seen that Minnesota doesn't want to throw to him the ball as much as some other running backs are going to get the ball thrown to them, And so I bump him down a little bit, but not a whole lot. I think he's going to have a great year.
Okay, so for me, my number 17th pick, which is teammate. And teammate in the first round took Odell Beckham. I'm going to follow it up with DeVonte Freeman. The last 3 years, in 45 games played, he scored 35 touchdowns, so he actually finds the end zone quite often. You look at, he's averaged 45 catches the last 3 years. 54 catches the last 3 years. So this is a guy who's used a lot in the passing game when he's healthy. Downside is a little bit smaller, and they have Tevin Coleman. But once again, beyond that, you can't escape the fact that he's been, like I said, he scored a lot of touchdowns. This guy's highly involved. He's very active in the passing game. And so for me, DeVonte Freeman, even though he has some question marks in terms of his health and size, he's my number 17 pick. So.
All right. All right, so now number 18, we have Melvin Gordon. And here's a guy I actually can already see myself moving up later on as we get close to the season. He gets 1,000 yards almost every year. He gets double-digit touchdowns. He's got no competition. He's a physical runner. He's got so many good things about him. The two concerns that people always had with him was a low yards per carry and lack of involvement in the passing game. But he really stepped it up last year, and I was happy to see that he got 58 receptions last year, if I'm not mistaken. That really bumps him up quite a bit of value for me. In past, he'd only gotten 30 to 40, but last year he really steps it up, and that was for me basically that and his yards per carry were the only two concerns I ever had for him, and he seems to be solving that concern. Again, that number should go up even further, like you said, now that Gates and Henry are gone. So for me, he comes in at number 18, but I guess humbly admitting, I wouldn't be surprised if I moved him up later on in the year, like you have him a little bit higher than me.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to follow up. I'm sitting at my number 18 pick. In the first round, they took Ezekiel Elliott. I'm going to follow that up with Keenan Allen. So you look at the last 3 years, when he's been healthy, average catches per game, and you kind of look over 16, it turns out to be averaging 117 catches per 16 games last 3 years when he's healthy. This is a guy that gets targeted a lot. He's really become the safety valve for Phillip Rivers, and I think that's going to become even increase this year with Henry and Gates gone. Now he's had a history of injuries that kind of bumps him down from tier 1 to tier 2, but this guy's got tier 1 type talent. During a stretch of his career, he's actually looked dominant. Now he had a good rookie season. In his second year, he fell back statistically. A lot of people kind of wondered, okay, who's the real Keenan Allen there? What's going on? But in 2015, his third year, he only played in 7 games. So it came out his third year. In the first 7 games when he was healthy, he looked great before getting injured. His first 7 games, he was on pace to have 142 catches, 1,577 yards, and 7 TDs. So this guy was having a huge year. In 2016, he was having a good year again. First half of that game, before he got injured, he had 6 catches, 63 yards. So everything looked good, and he rebounded last year for 102 catches, 1,393 yards, and 6 TDs. The bottom line is, if you take a look at his career, this guy's strength is as a possession receiver. He's upped in.
Here at 19 overall, I have Davante Adams. He actually moves down a little bit. I had him at 16 in standard leagues. He moves down again. It's very competitive for the receptions, and he only had 74 receptions last year, but he's definitely going to get more than that this year. He was number 2, and he missed Rodgers a ton, and so I imagine that number is going to go up quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if he had 80, 85 catches, but don't expect that number to go up too much. Like I said before, that number isn't going to go up a lot. He is facing number 1 corners, and so don't expect him to get 95, 100 catches. But again, it'll go up a little bit from 74.
Yeah, so for me, the first round they take Hopkins, wide receiver. You're going to love this team. And they followed it up with Saquon Barkley. So you got Hopkins and Barkley. Barkley's a stud. He has no deficiencies in his game as far as what we can see going in his first NFL season. He's going to be a true 3-down back. There's so many more backs coming out of college in the NFL that are just more involved, better prepared to be effective in passing game. And he's one of those guys that's known to have great hands, so he's going to be highly involved there. The hype is growing for this guy more and more as the season goes on. I think you're going to see him continue to rise up a lot of mock drafts, and come the actual drafts, he's going to get drafted quite early in many leagues. Another thing that's going to help, he couldn't have landed in a better situation. When the Giants improved their offensive line incredibly in free agency, and then he drafted Will Hernandez, the offensive line is going to be much improved. But I really like the fact there's a lot of great weapons around him with Odell, Beckham, Shepard, and Ingram. It's going to be very hard to load the box with this guy. So I think that's going to keep defenses honest. I could easily say 1,500 yards, 10 plus TDs is really nothing for this guy. I love him. So they take Hopkins. They follow it up with Saquon Barkley.
All right, solid pick. All right, now at number 20, I have Mike Evans. So why does he move? Previously, I had him at number 10. This seems like a huge drop. We have a few concerns. First is that he's had an up and down career. He definitely has had an up and down career. However, he has never had less than 1,000 yards receiving. He averaged 145 targets a season. He gets his stats from a lot of bulk. Here's my concern. Last year, his numbers were down and went down to 71 receptions, which really isn't that great. For a guy who's averaging 145 targets, only 71 receptions, that means he's only catching the ball half of the time that they're throwing it to him. I have some real concerns with that. And so that's why I've got to bump him down in PPR leagues. He doesn't catch the ball a lot. When he does, he makes big plays. He goes downfield for long touchdowns. And so in standard leagues, he does have value that way. He's a big body wideout. But again, he's not catching the ball as much as other people, as much as I would like, as much as other people on this list. So I got to bump him down. 20 may seem a bit low, but that's where I've got him.
Yeah, so for my number 20 pick here, they picked in the first round ALVIN. They're going to follow that up with a guy that actually I'm not really big on right now. And the reason why is he's older. And usually when you get to age 30 as a running back, that's the downside of your career. But they follow up ALVIN, drafting LaShawn McCoy. This guy's had a great career. He's a great back. But once again, at age 30, he's usually in the downside. And running backs usually quickly decline at this point. But the one thing that you can't ignore is just how talented this guy is, especially in terms of his involvement in the passing game. He's had 441 career catches. He's had 6 seasons with over 1,000 rushing yards, and 3 times he's had double-digit touchdowns in season. Now, if you look at over his career, you look at his per-game receptions over 16 games, it turns out to be averaging 53 catches per season, and you add to that he's had 15 career receiving touchdowns. So I'm not a huge LaShawn McCoy fan, but he is a PPR league, and he's highly involved in the passing game, and so to me he enters into my top 20.
All right. Not 21, I have Jordan Howard. Had him at 20, I bumped him down 1. He's absolutely horrible in the passing game. Last year, he only got 23 receptions, and that's a major concern for me. Now, you're probably wondering why I don't drop him down further in PPR leagues, because that's really low, and there's a lot of guys who should pass him up. And yet, I accounted for his lack of production in the passing game in standard leagues for this one reason. Tariq Cohen, he's going to get a lot of playing time and a lot of stats this year. I think he's going to have actually a fairly solid season. I don't think he's going to be a great fantasy running back, but he's going to take a lot away from Jordan Howard. Again, there's not a big gap between his standard and his PPR because he does get it done in the running game, and because of the fact that he doesn't receive well, I think that he's going to miss time, which just keeps his standard league value down a bit too. But again, 23 receptions is just brutal. He's got to get that up if he wants to make himself a viable fantasy running back in the future, especially in PPR leagues.
Yeah, Jordan Howard, he's led all running backs to 14 drop passes last 2 years. That's concerning. With that said, I love this guy. He's a great physical running back. The other thing that I heard in the offseason that the coaching staff is working very hard at getting him more involved in the passing game, working on him catching the ball in the backfield, and they believe that they can increase his involvement in the passing game. And so the fact that he's a great running back and the fact that teams are working really hard to get him more involved, it certainly could help increase his value there. It's hard to ignore just how good of a back he is. So for me, right now, in the first round, this team took Antonio Brown. They're going to follow that up with Leonard Fournette. This former first-round, 4th overall pick had a really good rookie year. Okay, he finished with 10 touchdowns, over 1,000 rushing yards, just 13 games. And he had some huge games, not only in the regular season, but in the postseason against the Steelers. We know in the playoffs he had 109 rushing yards and 3 TDs. And he had 6 games last year of over 100 rushing yards. If I have any concerns for him, one, I don't think he's highly involved in the passing game. I don't think he has great hands. They're not terrible, but they're not great. And then, of course, the play of Blake Bortles. But at this point, you got Antonio Brown at wide receiver, and you have a solid running back out there. It's hard to pass on the fact that this guy's a quality running back. He's going to get a bulk of the carries unless he's injured. You can trust him at this point, so we take.
All right, now at number 22, I have wide receiver AJ Green. Last year, he got 75 catches, which was 11th among wide receivers. Put him here. He's 29. He isn't young. He's okay. His receptions were down last year. His quarterback play wasn't good. I'd like to see that get better. I think that's the biggest thing that limits him. That's my biggest concern. However, 6 of his 7 years, he's had 1,000 yards. The one year that he didn't have 1,000 yards, in only 10 games, he had 964 receiving yards. So, you know, in a 16-game season where he's healthy, he easily passes 1,000 yards. He doesn't have any added or any lowered value at all in PPR leagues. He's just average. So, in fact, he stays the exact same spot. Was number 22, stays number 22. That's where he's at for me.
So at number 22, in the first round, they took David Johnson. Going to follow that up with Dalvin Cook. Now, Dalvin Cook had 11 catches through basically 3 games last year. He was on pace for 53 catches as a rookie, which is very, very good. He was really explosive before the injury. He had a 4.8 yards per carry on the year. He showed good hands and good instincts in the passing game. In fact, if you look at 3 of the 4 games last year, he actually had a yards per carry of 5.6. And heading into week 4, he was actually 3rd in the league in rushing. So everything pointed to him having this great season. Looked like he's got all the gifts and talents. He can be a true 3-down back. I can't speak tonight. It's been a long day. So he's a true 3rd-down or 3-down back. He'll be out there, and he's highly involved in all aspects of it. Any concerns we have for this guy, go back to the concerns they had for him coming out of college, which is durability. Coming out of college, they said the one thing, he had a hard time staying healthy, and we saw it the first year. So that's definitely a red flag I have. It's a concern I have. But how far do you let a guy like Dalvin Cook slip, especially when you consider it's a PPR league, and this guy's very good in the passing game? You got to take him right now. So at number 22, we take Dalvin Cook.
All right. Solid choice. Now at number 23, I'm going to take another tight end. I'm going to go with Rob Gronkowski, and here's why. He had 69 receptions last year, which was 5th among tight ends. However, he gets, which is pretty good. However, his value is also increased. Another reason he's up here is for his yards and his touchdowns. Since 2014, when he's healthy, he leads the Patriots in both touchdowns and yards. So in 14, 15, and 17, he's led the Patriots in those 2 statistics, yards and touchdowns. He is their number 1 guy. Tom Brady loves to throw the ball to him. That increases his receptions a lot. Again, 69 isn't great, but he gets it done so much better than everyone else. And then another thing is that, you know, a lot of people are asking me, why are you taking tight ends so early? As I mentioned earlier, last year, Gronk scored 139 fantasy points. Just 3 tight ends later, you're only getting 90 fantasy points, just 64%. It's so important in my mind, and you may disagree with this, but for me, it's so important to take either Gronk or Kelsey earlier. Otherwise, you're just going to be out of a solid tight end.
Okay, so for me at number 23, in the first round, they ended up taking Todd Gurley. Going to follow it up with Larry Fitzgerald. I know some people aren't going to like this pick, but hear me out. Larry Fitzgerald is a stud who's had a great career. Now at 35 years old, he's getting a little bit older. So why would I have him ranked so high? He gets less yards and TDs than he once did, but if you look at the last 3 years, he's averaged 108 catches the last 3 years. He's lost a step as he's gotten older, but his excellent hands make him a huge PPR stud. So he's got huge value in PPRs. He loses a lot of value in standard leagues. Now, it's rare that after the age 35 that players can put up good numbers, but some players have done that. In fact, if you look at Jerry Rice, he had 3 seasons of 1,000 receiving yards after the age of 35. Chris Carter did it, Terrell Owens did it, Tim Brown did it. And those are all guys that after the age of 35 had 1,000 receiving yards. So I take a look at him. He's in great shape. He's a consummate professional. This guy is a PPR stud. I think that he's a very safe and good play in PPR leagues. Once again, last 3 years, he's averaged 108 receptions per season. And I think that's going to happen. Sam Bradford or rookie quarterback are going to look to their possession receiver. They're going to look at kind of a safety valve. And I think he's a guy that's going to get a lot of targets, a lot of play in that offense.
All right, yeah, I completely agree with you. All right, so now my last guy in the second round, 24th overall, is Larry Fitzgerald. I'll admit, I copied you. You mentioned Larry Fitzgerald, that you were going to talk about him, and I thought, that's interesting. He doesn't ring a bell to me as a solid second round wideout, and so I looked into it, and I completely agree with you. 12 seasons, basically 12 years that he's been in the NFL, he's had 1,000 yards or been on pace for that. This guy is so dominant. Last year with his 109 receptions, he was second among all receivers. Really, the only 2 concerns are this. 1, his age, that he's 35 and that his body catches up to him and he gets hurt. 2, that Sam Bradford gets hurt. If Sam Bradford plays, he will Larry Fitzgerald will get tons of catches. That's feeds right into the way that Bradford likes to play. And in fact, honestly, even if he gets hurt, the rookie quarterback Rosen comes in, I imagine he's going to play very similar and throw a lot to the safe veteran wide receiver in Larry Fitzgerald. In standard leagues, he doesn't have that much value. He's not a big touchdown guy, and he is older, but I really agree with you. Thanks for kind of putting me on to him. Huge PPR guy.
Yeah, I had to kind of put my emotions aside because I'm like, man, I have a really hard time ranking him this high. But when I just look at the numbers and I look at the facts, he's a guy that you need to take serious consideration in PPR leagues. So for me, my number 24th pick, they had Le'Veon Bell. They're going to follow that up with Travis Kelce. So for me, in PPR leagues, tight ends, at least the top 4 tight ends, need to be bumped up on that list quite a bit. Travis Kelce has broke over 1,000 yards the last 2 years. He's seen a rise in red zone targets. Last year he had 8 touchdowns. In fact, I predict this is the year that he has double-digit touchdowns. Another thing that's huge for this guy is he's averaged 84 catches the last 2 years, even though he missed a game last year. So he is the number 1 tight end. Now, I flip it around. If you look at my tight end video, in standard leagues, I like Gronkowski better because he just sees the red zone more. This guy is a stud. But when it comes to PPR value, Travis Kelce just gets more catches. So I think that he's got a greater value there. He is my final pick in the second round.
All right. Well, we thank you guys for checking out our video. We really appreciate it. As always, leave comments down below. Let us know if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions, or ideas for future videos. And of course, leave a like. We really appreciate your support. As always, have a good day and God bless.